Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Pittsburgh Sports Memories Podcast. I am Tim Hannon, and with me, as always,
I'm Steve Wirt.
And we're going to do part 2 of our top 20 in-game mistakes. Now, just as a reminder from last time, the way we classified this is these have to be mistakes that were made essentially on the field. So we're not going to do, a bad draft pick or a bad trade or something like that. These would be things that happen during games and were committed kind of on the field or in the arena. We also, just like last time, we'll delve into some of the human components of these mistakes. Obviously, we're all human beings. We all make mistakes. And, there are people behind these, as painful as they were as fans. There are people behind these as well. So we already did our numbers 20 through 11. Go back and listen to that if you haven't already. And in this episode, we're going to count down from 10 to 1. Steve, any thoughts before we get rolling?
What comes after the number 10?
I believe that would be 9, if we're counting down.
Okay. I wasn't
sure. Yes. All right, here we go with mistake number 10.
Here's a handoff to Toussaint. Ball is on the ground and recovered by Ware.
So this is from a 2015 AFC divisional playoff game between the Steelers and the Denver Broncos in Denver. And that 2015 season, it's kind of a strange one for both teams. The Steelers had a very uneven season. They showed flashes of brilliance, but then they actually needed help on the last week of the season just to get into the playoffs. And then the Broncos were a really good team, but they were having issues at quarterback. They actually benched Peyton Manning that year because he kind of fell off a cliff. Manning is back for this game, and he's facing a very banged-up Steelers team. Really, all the Steelers' best players are hurt for this game. Antonio Brown is out. Ben Roethlisberger is playing, but he has a very bad shoulder from the week before against Cincinnati in the wild card playoff game. And the Steelers, the main thing about this game is the Steelers have no healthy running backs. Le'Veon Bell had gotten injured earlier in that season, and they had DeAngelo Williams as a really capable backup, but he had gotten hurt as well. And that leaves a guy named Fitzgerald Toussaint as the Steelers' primary running back against which was that year the number 1 defense in the league in Denver. But the Steelers are up for that challenge. And with 10 minutes left in the game, they're clinging to a 1-point lead. And they're in Denver territory. They hand the ball off to Toussaint. He runs for a first down at the Denver 30-yard line. So, again, 10 minutes left in the game. You're going to have first down at the 30-yard line. And the Steelers really, I don't want to say they had the game won, but they had all the momentum. And they could have added to the lead. They could have eaten more clock. But at the end of the run, Bradley Roby for the Broncos, he gets off of his block. He hits Toussaint, and the ball comes out. Toussaint didn't do a good job squaring his shoulders. And Denver recovers. Manning, who otherwise kind of had a very pedestrian game, he then leads the Broncos down the field for the game-winning touchdown. And again, that game, it was a weird loss because the Steelers had no business winning that game. The Denver was stacked that year. They eventually won the Super Bowl. They had this great defense, and the Steelers' offense didn't have all their best players. But then, we had that game won, Steve. I mean, it was first down at the 30-yard line with the lead in less than 10 minutes left. I mean, we kind of had that one.
I remember this game. Did somebody kick him or something on a block, and that's why the ball came out? Or am I thinking of another fumble? I might be thinking of another fumble.
So the guy that hit him, Bradley Roby, he was tangled up with Darius Hayward-Bay, and he just kind of got off the block at the last minute.
Okay, because I thought maybe his foot had come. It was like something weird like that. Like it wasn't completely his fault. Manning sucked that year. Like, didn't they beat Brock Osweiler earlier that year in the Broncos? Or am I?
It wasn't even earlier that year. It was literally like 3 weeks before this, at the end of the regular season at Heinz
and
Field.
they beat them convincingly too, if I remember correctly.
Yes, and they scored something like 34 points or 35 points. So as good as the Broncos defense was, when the Steelers had all their weapons, they were putting up points against that defense. And now they go to Denver and they can't put up a lot of points, but they
that was
the lead.
The reason we lost that game was because we decided we'd rather fake an injury against Cincinnati. See, Antonio Brown was faking his concussion from the week before in that game against Cincinnati because the Steelers really didn't want to go to the Super Bowl. This is all according to Dan Patrick now. This is we're inside Dan Patrick logic at this point. He literally had Adam Pac-Man Jones on his radio show during this week before the game and said Antonio Brown is faking his concussion. So to forward that lie, because they didn't want to get caught in that lie, I'm just taking Dan Patrick's logic here. Antonio Brown had to be held out so that they didn't get caught faking, their concussion. And they lost the chance to go to the Super Bowl because, they just wanted to make sure that they could beat Cincinnati the week before. So, I mean, that was, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
that team was totally hurt. It was after that game against Cincinnati. That was after on a cheap shot by Vontaze Burfict, which he got hurt. His shoulder got hurt. So, I mean, we really weren't going to, after that Cincinnati game, we would have to probably pay the Patriots after that. So they weren't going to beat the Patriots, not with that many people.
Probably not. But it just still hurt to lose in that fashion. If Denver wins that game by 30 points, I would have been fine with that because it's like, okay, yeah, we had nobody, but to have it won like that, and you got to feel bad for Toussaint. Again, going back to the human side of this, if you look at his history, he grew up in Youngstown. He had a really rough upbringing. His father was actually arrested for stabbing someone at one of Fitzgerald Toussaint's high school games, if that gives you just an idea of the home life he had. He got in trouble in Michigan when he played there, and he broke his leg. He ends up going undrafted. He does that whole journeyman thing of practice squads and bouncing from one team to the next. And now here he is starting a divisional playoff game for the Steelers. And up into that point, Steve, he was doing pretty good, if I remember. And he actually had the game's only touchdown on either side. So he was actually holding his own pretty well there. And had he not fumbled there, that people might remember Fitz Toussaint as the guy that came in and did a really good job, subbing in a big playoff upset. Instead, people only remember the fact that he fumbled.
Yeah, I think too. I remember D'Angelo Williams telling a story that like Tomlin apologized to the team after that loss, that he felt that they the coaching staff had kind of let him down. So and like that's why a lot of players really respect Tomlin and stuff. And it would have been easy to blame the injuries and stuff, but.
For sure.
Well, yeah.
All right, number 9.
Missed it. Rebound Howard. Did we have a foul? I think we may have had a foul.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't know that I've ever seen a game end like this in the NCAA tournament. I've been doing this for 16 straight years.
So when you get a comment like that, a Pitt team has to be involved.
Yes. Tim Brando was shocked here.
So Pitt's playing in the 2011 NCAA tournament where they are the number 1 seed in the Southeast region. They're playing in the second round, which I guess now is technically called the third round because they have that play-in round. I've never really adapted to that. They're playing in basically the second round against number 8 seed Butler. So it's that number 1 versus the 8-9 winner. And that should be a fairly easy win for a 1 seed. However, Yeah, Butler was no ordinary number 8 seed. They actually had made it to the championship game the year before, where they almost took out Duke. They came within one bounce off the rim of beating Duke in the championship game, and so it's a tough game, and it comes down to the final seconds. Pitt has a 69-68 lead, but Butler hits a shot with 2.2 seconds left to take a 1-point lead and presumably win the game. So 2.2 seconds left. Pitt just tries to inbound the ball. They throw it to Gilbert Brown. He charges up the court for trying to get off a miracle shot. But Shelvin Mack for Butler inexplicably fouls Brown near midcourt with 1.4 seconds left. And when I say foul, I mean he literally like body checked him into the bench, because they're normally not going to call too many ticky-tack things with 1 second left. But this guy Shelvin Mack, he plows Gilbert Brown into the bench, and you have to call it. And so now Pitt's going to go to the free throw line with 1.4 seconds left with a chance to win the game. And so really, this is going to be on the list of top 20 Butler in-game mistakes, not Pittsburgh in-game mistakes, because it's just a terrible, terrible foul. Well, Brown hits the first free throw, so now we're tied at 70, but unfortunately he misses the second one. And that stinks, because that was a golden opportunity to win the game right there, and Gilbert Brown kind of blew it. But at least he made the first one, so we're heading into overtime. But hang on, are we heading into overtime? Butler's Matt Howard grabs the rebound, and then he is fouled by Nasir Robinson of Pitt. And it's just beyond comprehension that Robinson would commit a foul there, because when Howard grabbed the rebound, remember, there's 1.4 seconds left. He's underneath the Pitt basket, and as soon as he grabs the rebound, the clock starts ticking. So he has nowhere to go. He probably doesn't even have time to cock his arm back for like some kind of miracle full court shot. And even if he somehow got that off, I mean, the chances of even hitting the backboard are probably 1 in a million. So there was just no reason to be aggressive there. Just let him grab the rebound and go to overtime. So now Butler gets to go to the line, and Howard hits his first shot to give Butler the lead, and then he misses his second one on purpose to end the game. And Steve, I just, to this day, I can't believe Nasir Robinson fouled him.
Yeah, he was like literally on the other side of the court under his own basket. Yeah, there was no reason to foul him there. I think he just wanted to win the game. He thought he could fight for a rebound or something. I remember that when that happened. They did not have DeJuan Blair that year, correct? Yes.
I think he was gone by then, yeah.
Yeah, because that was after Scotty Reynolds hitting that crazy shot the year before.
Yes. That was 2 years before, yeah.
Yeah, so I always contended if Pitt would have had DeJuan Blair that game, they would have beat Butler handedly, because Butler didn't even with Gilbert Brown, they had no answer for Pitt's like mediocre big men. Never mind, like he would have been an NBA, for sure draft pick, and yeah, that game kind of really hurts because it just Pitt should have beat them, and it's just like another. That was in the set. That wasn't even in the Sweet 16, was it?
Right, it was the second round.
Second round. Oh,
yep.
Jeez. What a... that sucks. That doesn't have a snazzy name. It's just the second round.
Well, and that was really Pitt's last stand as a college basketball powerhouse.
Nothing rhymes with
Dixon.
32, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and Pitt never really fielded a team of that level again. I mean, they really didn't. That was kind of their last shot.
I always thought more of the Gary McGee on Kemba Walker was kind of the end of Pitt basketball in general, like that in that Big East tournament.
I guess, but I mean, they were the number 1 seed that year in 2011, and they were number 1 seed, so they were still. And granted, again, Butler ends up going all the way back to the championship game again that year. So Butler was not. It was a little bit of a tough draw getting, the quote unquote number 8 seed Butler when they were in the championship game both those years. But again, just like the previous item on this list, Pitt had them beat. I mean, all they had to do was make the free throws, and then even then, okay, at least it's going in overtime, and to foul the guy under the basket. It's one thing, like the foul that the guy for Butler did whenever Gilbert Brown was charging up the court, that was a bad foul, but at least you're trying to guard him so he doesn't get the game-winning shot off. When you're
I think
underneath
it was
the
much
basket,
more plausible.
right? I mean, there's just absolutely it makes no sense. To Robinson's
Well, a lot
credit,
of times, like they'll pull the guys off the line, when he makes that game tying. Free throw. Sometimes they'll just pull, so you don't even have the opportunity to foul. But
well,
normally
I think
that's if you have a lead, not tie.
right, because the thought was that if you miss, you could get an offensive rebound,
you can tip it back.
Right.
Yeah.
And to your point, and to your point, that is probably what he was thinking. He was trying to be aggressive, trying to get the rebound and put it back in to win the game. But I mean, fine, you can do that, but be very careful. And by all means, if you don't wrestle for the ball at that point, you either got it on the bounce or on the coming down from the rim, or you didn't. So Robinson, one thing to say about him is he really handled all that in a very stand-up way. He does interviews, he accepts full responsibility for the mistake, and his teammates say years later, I read some interviews with some of his teammates years after this, that he had all these people on social media coming at him saying, you lost me money or you messed up my bracket. So for a kid that's in college, that's just got to be so tough. And that kid was a good player and a good guy. So you do feel bad for him. He was a junior in college and he just made a mistake. And unfortunately, it was at the worst time. All right. Number 8 on our list.
2:28 to go as Lane from the red line will crank it up. He fires way wide. Off the boards, Carlisle goes after Steele. Scores! The Islanders tie it! And they're going crazy at the Coliseum!
Yeah, there's few words for how much I hate the New York Islanders. I don't know, Steve, if there's any other franchise in sports, in any sport, where like literally all their worst moments came against the same team, right? Is there any other situation like that?
Washington Capitals. We're the Washington Capitals to them.
Yeah, I guess that's probably the best comparison.
We beat them literally one time ever in the playoffs, and that was Brooks Orpik had to score a goal in Game 7 overtime. I mean, that's the only time. That's it. That's the list.
I know.
And it's something like I remember even this year their record like in elimination games at that arena is unreal. It's like 7 times now they've only been eliminated there.
Yeah, the Nassau Coliseum.
I think it's 7 or 8 if you include this year in the. Did they win? No, because they lost on the road, didn't they? Or did they lose at home? I can't remember.
I don't remember if it was in Montreal or on the road, but I know I will not miss that building. So in 1982, the Penguins are playing the Islanders in the first round of the playoffs. And in 1982, the Islanders are 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions. They're also the best team in the league in 1982, record-wise. And they had won an NHL record 15 consecutive games that year. So, I mean, they're a dynasty in every sense of the word. They're by far the powerhouse team in the entire league. The Penguins, meanwhile, finished in 4th place in the Patrick division, 43 points behind New York. So, I mean, they weren't even in the same stratosphere. But because back then there weren't that many teams.
Gotta love the NHL like regular season setup, huh?
Well, and it was so weird in the 80s because the NHL for a long time had 21 teams and 16 of them made the playoffs. So if you look at any other league or any other year, and you're only taking the 5 worst teams out, that means you're going to put a lot of really bad teams in the playoffs. And again, the Penguins 43 points behind the Islanders. I mean, they weren't a bad team, but they weren't in the same
And it wasn't geographical. You got to remember, too, the way the divisions were set up. they weren't geographical. They just, because they couldn't be, they didn't have enough teams in the West. So they
Right.
just kind of threw everybody. That's why there was a Patrick division, the Smythe division. What was it? The Norris division. That's why
Adams.
they weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't Northeast, West, South, Central. Yeah. Which
Yep. And back then, the first round of the playoffs, maybe
was
because
in your division, just
It
like
was-
this year. It was.
Yep.
I love the way they went. I hope they put like just Seattle came into the league this year. Seattle needs to go into the Canadian division and keep all the divisions the same. I know, like,
yeah, I kinda
some
like
people
that.
complain. I like the setup, and I like how it goes back to the old Patrick division where you got to play your way out of your division. That's just makes it so much better for rivalries. And yeah, the NHL got it right this time with realignment. If that's one thing COVID, like, one of the few positives was it forced NHL realignment. And I know people always complain, oh, well, the Canadian division sucks. Like there isn't going to be a division in one of the other ones that's going to suck. It's just going to float around, and somebody's not going to be good every once in a while. But
when everybody said that,
like it, just
everybody said that, and yet Montreal, made it to the finals. So
Well, their excuse is, well, they only really had to play one good team. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you can only play the teams that you play.
Right. Right.
I mean, Vegas should have had an easy, series then. So
Yep. So the other thing about the first round back then was it was a best of 5, not a best of 7. And I don't know if that was just because of the mismatches you traditionally had in those first round series or what, but it was only a best of 5, and then the subsequent rounds were best of 7s. So the Islanders opened that series at Nassau Coliseum with 2 blowout wins against the Penguins. So everybody's like, okay, this is going as planned. This is going to be a short series. They'll dispose of Pittsburgh quickly and be on their way to another championship. And Eddie DeBartolo, the owner of the Penguins, even offers refunds to Penguin fans because it was so lopsided, if you can believe that, or imagine an owner doing that today. He actually said, like, yeah, I'm sorry you guys bought tickets for this. This is completely unfair. If you want your money back, you can have it. So that's how bad it was.
I bet, I'm sure Bob Nutting's doing that this year. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure he would do. He would. Yeah, I'm sure. But what happens is the Penguins shock everybody by winning Game 3 and then Game 4 at home, and then it sends the series back to Long Island for the deciding Game 5. And in Game 5, the Penguins have a 3-2 lead with 2 minutes left in the game. So literally 2 minutes left. They're on the precipice of maybe the biggest upset in NHL history up to that point. I mean, it really was, because again, New York was the best team in the league, 2-time defending champion, record winning streak. And here it is, 2 minutes left, and the Penguins are going to pull this off. Well, New York is charging. They're trying to tie the game, and they dump the puck into the corner of the Penguins' end. And Penguins defenseman Randy Carlyle, who had won the Norris Trophy the year before, so he's no slouch of a defenseman. And then later, of course, he became kind of a jerk of a head coach. But he goes to retrieve the puck, and it takes kind of a weird bounce because Nassau Coliseum, and it just kind of like hops right over his stick. And John Tonelli is charging at the net, and the puck literally just kind of comes right to him, and he puts it in the net. That sends the game into overtime, and then in overtime, Tonelli gets the game winner. So the Islanders win, and the Penguins do not pull off the upset. And here's a fun fact about that game. The Islanders would go on to win the Stanley Cup that year and the year after. So they won 4 Stanley Cups in a row, which means, what is that, Steve? 12 playoff series that they were in those 4 years. This game was the only time in that 4-year stretch of that dynasty that they even faced elimination. They literally never got to a Game 5 or a Game 7 in any of those other 11 series. This was the only time someone even took them to elimination game. That's how dominant they were. And the Penguins had them beat with 2 minutes left in the game. And Carlisle misplayed the puck, and it didn't happen. And Carlisle says, 40 years later, that people still bring it up, and that it stings.
Hey, another fun fact about the Islanders is this is the last sports team to three-peat.
Oh, wow.
Nobody's done it. Yeah, nobody's done it since whatever year
Okay.
this was.
Okay.
This is second.
80.
So this wasn't the three-peat year yet, so they would have been the next year. And I didn't realize. I thought they won the cup in '77 when they came back from their 0-3. I guess they didn't.
No, they didn't.
That year, the Penguins blew
Right.
their.
Well, and when we talk about the history with the Islanders, that's what
That's
it is.
part of it. Is that's a big one. Is like they listed it again when who went down. Montreal went down to Tampa 3 games to none, and it's literally what Boston, Philadelphia, is Chicago in there, and then the Penguins and Montreal and Toronto back in the 40s. That's the list.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
New York
yeah,
and
it's
the New
crazy.
York
Yeah.
Yankees against the Boston Red Sox. Like that's literally in all of sports.
Yeah.
There's only a handful
Yeah.
of 7-game series where someone's come back from
Japanese.
3-0.
There's something in Japanese baseball too. Yeah, there's one in Japanese baseball. I mean, if
It's
that
pretty
counts for
rare.
anything.
It's very,
Yeah.
very rare. And the Penguins blew a 3-0 lead against them in '75. This happened in '82. And then the ironic thing was 11 years later, the exact same scenario was flipped where the Penguins were the 2-time defending champions. They had the record winning streak. They were the President's Trophy winners. But this time the Islanders upset them. So it just, I can't say enough about just the tragedy of Penguins versus Islanders and how horrible that's been for this franchise.
Let's talk about the Capitals, the Penguins and the Capitals.
Yeah, I'd much rather talk about that.
It's much more fun.
It's much more
fun
fun.
on that side of the. Yeah.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. All right. Number 7 on our list.
Here's the give to Jerome. He hesitates. Oh, the ball is fumbled. And the Colts pick it up. Look out. Nick Harper has it. He's running. And Big Ben can't. He tackles him. He tackles him at the 43-yard line. Jerome Bettis, who rarely fumbles at the goal line. Nick Harper picks it up, and the Colts are still alive with 1:09 to go.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So I think, most Pittsburgh sports fans will instantly recognize that play. It's the Steelers and the Colts in the 2005 AFC divisional playoffs. Colts are by far the best team in football that year. They actually almost went undefeated, and they had crushed the Steelers just a few weeks earlier in their stadium. Steelers were huge underdogs, but they had a pretty good defense and a second-year quarterback named Ben Roethlisberger. And sure enough, they outplay Indianapolis. They find themselves in the lead late in the game. And a bunch of crazy things happen in the final 5 minutes of this game, including a very bad call on an interception that should have iced the game. But we won't go into all that. We actually did an entire episode just on this game. So by all means, go back and listen to that if you haven't already. The bottom line is that the Steelers have the ball on the Colts 2-yard line. They're going to ice the game with a handoff to their dependable Hall of Fame goal line back, Jerome Bettis. He's hit and he fumbles, and the ball's picked up by a guy named Nick Harper, who is miraculously chased down by Ben Roethlisberger to save the season for the Steelers. And then, of course, we all know what happens next. The idiot kicker misses the game-tying field goal, and the Steelers pull off a great upset. And then 3 weeks later, they capture the elusive one for the thumb in Detroit in Bettis's final ever game in his hometown. So, there's not a lot more to say about this play or this season. Again, we did a 3-part episode on this season. So not much else to say. I will add 2 things. First of all, if Harper scores on that play, if Ben doesn't catch him, then this play, I don't know if you agree, Steve, this has to be number 1 on this list, right? Like this has to be the biggest in-game mistake, not only in Pittsburgh sports history, but maybe sports history in general.
It's up there with Ernest Biner's fumble, that's for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
that's or I can't think of like anything else.
Bill Buckner.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
I mean, that's a rough one. And yeah, it's great to hear Tunchilkin too on the call, because I forgot. I haven't heard it in a while, and just him going, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah.
And then Tunch was awesome back when he was in his prime and healthy, and
Yes.
God bless that guy. I miss it. He just retired this year. If you heard him last year, it was a shame that he isn't able to do the games anymore. But
Yeah. Yeah, he will be.
That was fun to
He
hear.
missed.
Yeah, it was fun to hear him. He was such a good color announcer and such a great part of Steelers stuff. So that I would like that. I'm glad you played that, Tim. That was nice to hear Tunch's voice again. We had some, even though that memory's painful, but the result, makes it a little less,
It does.
So.
It's we can all look at it and kind of breathe a sigh of relief now, even though we were, people were literally having heart attacks at the time. The other thing I'll say is, and Steve, you talked about this at length in the episode we did, but Nick Harper cutting to the middle of the field rather than running to the sidelines. If there's an Indianapolis sports podcast out there, that has to be in there.
Yeah.
That has to be in their top 10, right? Because all he had to do was just cut to the side, and he cut to the middle, and that's the only reason Ben caught him.
Yeah.
So, fortunately for us, there was a mistake on the Colts side too, and then of course, the kicker missing, and he missed badly too. What was that guy Vanderjagt? I mean, he missed by a mile. So, fortunately, the Steelers were saved there, and this one's still in our top 10 because it was a huge mistake, but fortunately, it did not cost the Steelers a win or a Super Bowl title. All right, number 6 on our list was much more costly.
Watching a lot of his records get shattered. Trouble on the extra point. Andrew Janocko, the holder, picks it up, but he won't get there.
He just put the ball down and slipped out of his hand.
Yeah, perfect snap.
So these are going to get rougher now as we get into these into closer to number 1. So 2009, Pitt coach Dave Wanstead, he's in his 5th season, and by this time he's really built a good program. Pitt goes 9-1 to start that season. They're ranked number 8 in the country, and the last game of the season is at home against Cincinnati. Cincinnati was undefeated that year under Brian Kelly. And Pitt's only loss came out of conference. It was to NC State. So if Pitt beat Cincinnati in that finale,
of course it was.
Yes, of course.
It was.
That's another.
Was that the Russell Wilson game?
It was, and nobody would even remember that Russell Wilson played for NC State, but we do because of that game.
I remember that game.
Yep, because he ended up transferring to Wisconsin. But yeah, anyway, that's Pitt NC State's another. It's not quite Penguins Islanders, but it's.
Well, you talk about the Islanders and Penguins. NC State has become like Pitt's, like they took the place of Syracuse when Pitt started beating Syracuse. Now Pitt can't beat. They can't beat NC State. They lost them in baseball, basketball, football, women's lacrosse. You just can't beat NC State in any sport right now. I don't know what's going on. So
well, they're in the same conference now. In 2009, they were not, and so that game really didn't matter. And the game that mattered was the finale against Cincinnati. Whoever won that game is going to win the Big East and go to the Sugar Bowl, which was pretty big. And we covered this before, and we said it at the time. In terms of what was at stake, we both agreed, Steve, that it was the biggest game for Pitt since the Dan Marino era, and still is to this day, in terms of what was at stake. So the game itself was a shootout. Dion Lewis for Pitt, he rushes for 194 yards and 3 touchdowns on 47 carries. And that was a cold day.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was a cold day. It was snowing. It was, and he just carried the team on his shoulders. Tony Pike was the Cincinnati quarterback. He carried his team on his shoulders. He has a great game, 300 plus yards, 3 touchdowns. Pitt jumps out to a 31-10 lead, but Cincinnati comes all the way back to tie it. And then Bill Stahl, the quarterback for Pitt, he leads them down the field on a 67-yard drive. And with 96 seconds left in the game, Dion Lewis takes it in for the go-ahead touchdown. And it's a great moment. Pitt takes the lead with just over a minute left. Lewis goes over to the sidelines. Tony Dorsett standing over there, and he hugs Lewis coming off the field. So now you're at this point where, okay, Pitt's got the lead, and maybe Cincinnati can come back and tie it, but that's the best they can do is tie it. But Pitt botches the extra point, and it's not even that the kicker missed it. It was a perfect snap, but Andrew Janocko, who is the holder, he just has the ball slip out of his hands, and they don't even get the kick off. So now Pitt's only up by 6 instead of 7, and sure enough, Cincinnati drives down the field, scores a touchdown in the final 30 seconds. make the extra point on their side, and now they're the Big East champions. And it was really a painful loss. Pitt would have played against Tim Tebow and Florida in the Sugar Bowl. And, I don't know how they would have fared in that game, but that would have been, just even being in that game would have been really the greatest accomplishment of the past 40 years of Pitt football. And it didn't happen because of an extra point. And not, again, missing an extra point to lose the conference championship would have been heartbreaking. But, extra points, people miss extra points. That happens, especially in college. But to just drop the ball, the holder just dropped the ball. It snapped right in his hands, and he just dropped it. Janocko was crushed. He was a sophomore walk-on. He had turned down scholarships from other schools to walk on at Pitt because, and Steve, you talked about this when we covered this game once before, his thought process was he wanted to be a coach. And so he walked on at Pitt because he thought he could learn a lot from Dave Wanstead, who had coached in the NFL a lot. And sure enough, Janocko today is the quarterback coach for the Minnesota Vikings and is one of those up and coming, could be an offensive coordinator or a head coach someday in the NFL. So I think, I think he shook off that mistake and seems to be having a good coaching career now, but boy, did that hurt.
Yeah. And like you said, Andrew Janocko, he was a big star up in Clearfield, I think. And I think they won a class AA title. And I think his father is a big high school football coach. So like you said, his goal was to become a football coach. And that's why he came here, because he could have went to a lower level school, but thankfully nobody really remembers that or holds it against him because it's Pitt. And freaking Brian Kelly, and that's another thing is like Cincinnati, like of all the like schools out there, and nothing against like Pitt or like Syracuse or any of these other like kind of like schools that have like had great players way back when. The University of Cincinnati's done everything in their power to deserve to be a power, like in one of the Power 6 conferences. I guess just because they're in Ohio and they don't have a huge fan base. So that's maybe why they don't get it. But why the University of Cincinnati isn't in like the ACC or, whatever, they probably would fit in the ACC, quite honestly, but they deserve it more than Louisville. That's for sure.
Yeah. And who knows? I've never quite understood why some of those teams are in and some of those teams are not, but that's college football for you.
Yeah. It's a mess. It's a mess.
All right. Number 5, let's circle right back to the New York freaking Islanders.
And again, down to Tristan Jarry. A steal. Josh Bailey scores! Josh Bailey on a turnover! In double overtime, the New York Islanders have won Game 5.
Yeah, so this one's pretty recent. 2021, the NHL has a shortened season due to the COVID pandemic. And no one's really quite sure what to expect out of the Penguins because in recent years, they have not fared well in the postseason, and they're kind of in the middle of an overhaul. Jim Rutherford, who was the general manager, abruptly resigns during the season, and he's replaced by, and I still can't even say this, he's replaced by Ron Hextall. It still has not hit me that Ron Hextall is our GM. Anyhow, the Pens end up having a pretty good season. They actually surprised a lot of people. They win. Stevie talked about those reconfigured divisions. They win that Eastern Division. It's their first division title in 7 years. And sure enough, their first round opponent is the Islanders. And everybody knows the history, like we just talked about. But boy, the Penguins should be the better team here. Well, it ends up being a fairly evenly matched series. The series is tied 2 games apiece, and the pivotal Game 5 is in Pittsburgh. And that game goes back and forth. It goes into overtime. No one scores. And now it goes into a second overtime. So, with the series tied 2-2 and in double overtime, you're basically at the point there where the next goal could effectively end the series. It's not going to end the series, but to lose that deciding game in double overtime especially if you're the Penguins having to go on the road for Game 6. That's going to be hard to overcome. So the next goal is going to be big. The Penguins goaltender is Tristan Jarry. The Penguins had anointed him to replace Matt Murray. They had traded Matt Murray over the offseason, and they believed in him so much that they actually assigned him to a 3-year contract extension before the season. And Jarry had not been having a great series up until that point. He really hadn't. But in that game, he was holding the Islanders at bay. He wasn't playing too bad. And in the second overtime, there's a play where the Pens try to set up Evgeny Malkin at the point, but the pass goes past him and it trickles all the way down the ice to Jarry. Whatever, no big deal. That happens all the time. So Jarry has it on his stick, and he should send it up the boards to one of his teammates, or he could even, he could have even fallen on the puck. That wouldn't have been a great idea. But instead, he does the absolute worst thing possible, and he throws the puck right to the middle of the ice. And Josh Bailey for New York is skating right at Jarry. Jarry passes it right to him. Then to make matters worse, Jarry panics and tries to poke check the puck away from Bailey instead of staying in his net to try to make a save. And Bailey scores. He ends the game in double overtime. Jarry then has a horrendous Game 6, which I think he got pulled out of in the second period. And the Penguins are eliminated. And it's just one of the worst plays and worst mistakes that in Penguins history. He just threw the puck right to him at the most critical time of the series. And I think what made people upset, Steve, was, when they did interviews and stuff with Jarry after this, he was just kind of aloof. And, like they asked him, like, what would you do differently? And he's kind of like, I don't know, maybe just leave the puck where it is. Like he didn't, you wanted him to say something that made it sound like he understood the gravity of what happened, that made you think, okay, I'm going to bounce back from this in Game 6, because there was still a Game 6. And he just kind of was like, I guess I messed up.
I like, is that your Tristan Jarry impersonation?
Yeah, I'm Tristan Jarry. I throw the puck to the middle of the ice when there's a guy charging right at me, because I don't like to win hockey games. Oh, well.
Well, Tristan Jarry really wasn't that good, quite honestly. So I kind of gave up on Tristan Jarry when he almost blew a 7-0 lead to the New Jersey Devils. And one of those goals came on just like he did in this game. The Devils had an empty net, and he tried to shoot the puck into the empty net to score a goal. Like his boss, Ron Hextall has a goal, I'm pretty sure. So he was trying to be all cool, and he gave up another goal, and they almost gave up a 7-goal lead. I think the Penguins actually won that game 7-6. So I was kind of done with Jarry there, but the Penguins weren't. So, and I bet they wish they had. I'm not sure if that's one of the reasons that Jim Rutherford left, was because that was a rumors that he wanted to trade for Fleury, and who he wanted to trade for, I guess the Penguins wouldn't go for it. So.
Yeah. Who knows? Jarry's definitely. I agree. I don't think Jarry is the answer long term, and I think Jarry proved that. And again, just that whole aloofness, or like you said, trying to score a goal instead of protecting the lead. It's, I don't know. Maybe he matures. Maybe he becomes a good goalie eventually. But boy, it's going to be hard to overcome what happened in that playoff series. And that's why it's number 5 on our list.
Yay.
So on to another kind of aloof Pittsburgh athlete making a huge mistake at a big moment for our number 4 item on the list.
Pittsburgh with the ball down by 4. Mendenhall, loss of football. Picked up by Bishop.
In 2010, the Steelers are in the Super Bowl against the Green Bay Packers, and they're looking to win their 3rd championship in 6 years, but the first half doesn't go well. The Packers jump out to a huge lead, and the Steelers have no answer for Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers, who to this day is, the only game of importance where Rodgers actually won. But the Steelers do start a comeback in the second half. But it's true. What name one other big game that Aaron Rodgers won in his life?
The Pro Bowl. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, he's lost 4 NFC Championships games since then, but it's okay. It's all Green Bay's fault. They don't put a good team around him, because Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones, those guys suck. And the fact that they had a top 10 defense in yards allowed last year, it's all the organization's fault. Anyhow, that's I actually like Aaron Rodgers.
And they turned over. The best part is like in the second half of that game, Brady played god awful. He threw 2 interceptions in a row, and they couldn't take advantage of it.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it was 3. There's no reason Green Bay should have come back, and that should have been, oh look, Tom Brady blew a game, but oh well.
I actually like Aaron Rodgers. I really do, and he's a great player. I'm so annoyed by the fact that, if anybody else had the track record that he does of losing 4 NFC title games and not winning, championships, he won a championship in 2010 and never won one again. Like, that person would be criticized, and Aaron Rodgers instead, people bash the organization for not helping him, whatever that means. So, but anyway,
he's kind of got Drew Brees is the same way. He doesn't get,
Yeah, Drew Brees, you could make the same argument. He won a championship and then, had some really good teams and never did it again. Heck, Ben won 2 championships. And all 3 of those guys spent the 2010s with good teams and not winning championships. But I feel like Ben and Brees get some criticism, and Rodgers is just like, oh, he should leave Green Bay because they hosed him. It's like, what? He has a top 5 running back and a top 5 receiver on his offense and a good defense, but yet, it's never his fault. I never understood that. It was the same thing with Brett Favre when he was there. I don't know what it is about Packers quarterbacks, just can't do anything wrong. But anyway, that's not a Green Bay podcast, so let's get back on topic here. In that Super Bowl 45, the Steelers mount a comeback in the second half. And at the start of the fourth quarter, they cut the lead to 21-17. And they're actually driving for the go-ahead score. They hand the ball off to Rashard Mendenhall, who was their leading rusher that year. He's hit by Clay Matthews, and the ball pops out. Green Bay recovers, and that's kind of it. The Steelers never recover from that play, and they go on to lose the Super Bowl. And the tough thing with Mendenhall was, he had a lot of natural talent. He was a first-round pick after all. But, he never quite seemed like football was his favorite thing in the world. He really wanted to be a writer, and I use that word aloof. He was always kind of aloof, and he upset a lot of people with a tweet sympathizing with Osama bin Laden after the United States had taken out bin Laden. He kind of said he was very sympathetic to bin Laden's cause, and that wasn't very smart. And he also had a fumbling problem earlier in his career. Well, and sorry, back to the bin Laden thing. That wasn't the only time he was kind of on the wrong side of a tweet. He also, a couple years later, took Antonio Brown's side in that whole Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger beef. So he just, Rashard Mendenhall just liked to take the sides of people that were, way in the wrong and were proven to be way in the wrong. So just not the best judgment on his part. He also had a fumbling problem early in his career. Hines Ward once placed a ball in his locker and put a little note on it saying, take Mendenhall's ball away and get $100 from him. And so Mendenhall was then required to carry the ball everywhere he went until the team's next game. So it was a history with him where he did fumble, and then he fumbles in the biggest game of his life.
Yes, Rashard Mendenhall, talented running back, fumbleitis. He definitely had a case of the fumbleitis, so I don't know what to say with good old Rashard there. I really liked him. I liked him in college, and I liked him as a pro, but he just never really worked out. He did get hit really. That was the play he got hit by Matthews really hard, and he fumbled.
It was, but
I don't think it was completely. I think that's more Clay Matthews making a play than Rashard Mendenhall fumbling. But
I think if it just wasn't him, if that were Bettis or Willie Parker or, somebody that again, it was just Mendenhall just kind of like, oh, whatever. Like it was just kind of his attitude. I mean, his last game as a Steeler was that game against the Chargers where he didn't show up to the stadium because he didn't feel like showing up to the stadium. He wasn't a team guy. He wasn't a winner. And I think that play just kind of summarized everything. It's like the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. You're in their territory. You could potentially take the lead. And then he just can't hang on to the ball.
Well, Ben had a chance too late in that game to drive him down and tie it up, just like he had the Super Bowl before, and he threw high to Mike Wallace, if I remember, on
right
down on that. So
he did, but that wouldn't have been necessary had Fumbly not had fumbled the ball. So it is what it is. And again, maybe the Steelers don't win that game, but it just hurts for him to fumble again. Fumbling in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl is just going to put you high on the list. All right, number 3 on the list. So we started this list way back at number 20 with Al Michaels calling a Steeler game in January of 2021. Here's Al Michaels calling a Pirates game 50 years earlier because Al Michaels is apparently a vampire.
And the 1-1 pitch to McRae in the dirt. It's a wild pitch. Here comes Foster. The Reds win the pennant. Bob Moose throws a wild pitch, and the Reds have won the National League pennant.
So this is 1972. The Pirates are playing the Reds in Game 5 of the National League Championship Series. And back then, kind of like we talked about with hockey, back then the NLCS and the ALCS in baseball were 5-game series, not 7-game series like they are today. So Game 5 was a deciding game.
Yeah, these were only 5 years old, right? This is 72. So, yeah, 68, they had only started playing these.
Right, they were very new.
Back in 67, yeah, you would just go right to the World Series. What a novel concept, win the pennant. And you could literally have a 100-win season and be like, all right, thanks for playing, boys. See you next year.
Yeah, and that's, I think that, that was a smart idea. And then baseball eventually in the 90s expanded that to divisional playoff series and wild cards and everything else. But back then, yeah, this was a very new thing, and that was only a 5-game series to get to the 7-game World Series. So again, Game 5, the winner of this game goes to the World Series, and the Pirates have a 3-2 lead into the bottom of the 9th inning, and they bring in their closer that year, a guy named Dave Justy, to hopefully close out the series and send them to the World Series. The first batter up is the National League MVP that year and Hall of Famer Johnny Bench, and he promptly cranks a home run over the right field wall. So right off the bat, okay, well, game's not over, the game's tied, and Justy surrenders another hit. He gets pulled. The Pirates put Bob Moose into the game. And a few batters later, here's the situation. Hal McRae is at the plate for the Reds. There's 2 outs and a guy on third. So, I mean, now it's at the point with 2 outs, either Hal McRae gets a hit or the Pirates get him out and we go to extra innings. So instead of forcing that scenario, Moose throws a pitch in the dirt, which bounces like 20 miles away from the catcher, and the Reds score the winning run on a wild pitch. And that hurt. I mean, the Pirates were the defending world champions that year, so they were trying to repeat. And to lose the game, Bench hit a home run. Bench was a Hall of Famer, and he hit a home run to tie the game because that's what Hall of Fame players and MVPs do. And if Hal McRae gets a hit there, again, that's clutch, and the Reds win.
Hal McRae
right?
was pretty good too.
He was. That's what I'm saying. Like that's
yeah.
Okay. That's no shame in losing that. I mean, that's the team just being better. But to lose on a wild pitch, I mean, Moose throws the ball in the dirt and they lose on a wild pitch. That's why this is number 3. And there's a lot of tragedy actually associated with this game. It ends up being Roberto Clemente's final ever game because he dies several months later in a plane crash. And then Bob Moose actually also passes away tragically a few years later in a car accident. So, just a terrible moment in Pittsburgh sports history all around, and something that should have never happened. Here's a fun
Yeah,
fact for
yeah,
you, Steve. Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, I was gonna say like that kind of like thinking like I know that's like one of our podcast ideas is like that December of 1972. Like it's probably like one of the worst months in Pittsburgh sports history. So we'll have to cover that at some point because just like Clemente dies and obviously after this happens, there's a lot of like kind of like tragic stuff that happens just on and off the field. So
Yeah, that would be a good topic for a future episode. That just 1972 in Pittsburgh sports, because you also had the Immaculate Reception. You also had one of the items,
the Dolphins. Yeah, the Dolphins
fake punt,
ruining everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and you also had the item earlier on this list with Tim Horton for the Penguins. Remember, that was our number 11 item on this list. So that was also 72. Yeah. So yeah, there'd be a lot to cover in 72 in Pittsburgh sports. Here's a fun fact for you. This was not the first time that the Pirates had lost a postseason series on a wild pitch. That actually happened.
Not surprise me.
Yeah. Yep. That's the Pirates for you. That's actually how the 1927 World Series ended. Was on a wild pitch to the Yankees. That's how the Pirates lost that series. Yeah. Now, granted,
didn't they get swept? I thought.
Yeah, they did.
That was not swept. Yeah. Yes. So what?
It was not a Game 7.
Why
it was
would you
not
throw a strike to like?
They just wanted out of there.
Yeah, I mean, why would you throw this strike
was
to
up
anybody on that line?
Yeah, just throw the ball in the dirt so we can all go home. I tried to look up if that's ever happened. I don't know if those are the only two times in Major League Baseball history that's happened. I could not find the answer to that. I mean, now you have so many more postseason series, right? You have the wild card play-ins, and you have the divisional series, and so you have a lot more opportunity for a stat. Like the only time a series has ever ended, but up into that point, I mean, that was it was all Pirates throwing wild pitches to end series. So that stunk. So let's go to the number 2 item on our list, and let's fast forward 20 years where the Pirates are once again in the bottom of the 9th inning of the deciding game of the National League Championship Series.
Justice at the plate, Bream on deck. Rounded to the right, booted by Lee. Pendleton to third on the play.
A man who has made only 6 errors during the regular season makes his second here tonight, and it could turn out to be the biggest error of his life.
And it did turn out to be that.
Tim McKyer. Where's McKyer at?
McCarver, you mean?
Yeah, did I say McKyer?
Yeah.
McCarver. Yeah, that's it. Sorry, I misquoted Dion. Sorry, you can't call him Dion. Mr. Sanders. Yeah.
So 1992, the Pirates are playing in the NLCS for the 3rd straight year, and this time it looks like they're finally going to make the World Series because they have a 2-0 lead in the bottom of the 9th inning against the Atlanta Braves. Doug Dravik's pitching a masterpiece. All they have to do is get the final 3 outs. Terry Pendleton leads off the inning with a double, and now David Justice is at the plate for Atlanta, and he hits a ground ball to second, which is booted by Pirates second baseman Jose Lane. And it proves to be huge because, as we detailed in the episode we did about this game, again, go back and listen if you haven't, and about this era in Pirates baseball. The Pirates were able to get 2 more outs before Francisco Cabrera gets the hit that wins the series. So if Lane makes that play, the Pirates win the pennant. And I have this number 2 on the list because obviously it was costly, but also because of really 2 things. One was this was such a critical juncture in Pirates history. They had. It was really a culmination of a decade-long journey. They had the 1980s were not kind to the Pirates. They had the drug trials. They almost lose the franchise altogether. They rebuild under Jim Leland and Sid Thrift. They lose the NLCS the previous 2 seasons. So it was a culmination of this journey to get to the World Series back for the first time since 1979. But then also, if you look at the future, and everybody knew it at the time, it was not like we were just looking back on this years later. This was their last chance to be competitive because of the economics of baseball. They knew they were going to lose Barry Bonds and Drabek and everybody else. So everything hinged on that inning. So that's number one reason why it was so high on the list. But the other reason it's so high on the list is because the immense level of improbability of this happening. Jose Lind was on this team strictly for his defense. He was a .235 hitter that season with no home runs and 468 at-bats. There are pitchers who hit better than that. I mean, he was totally worthless on offense. But Lind was a brilliant defensive second baseman. And 1992 was his best season. The Gold Glove Award, if you know what that is, in every position in baseball, every year they give out a Gold Glove Award for the best defensive player at that position. And that had gone for 9 consecutive years to the second baseman for the Chicago Cubs, a guy named Ryne Sandberg, who's in the Hall of Fame. And in 1992...
ALNL? Do they do
Yes.
American League and National League on that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
So the National League...
But you are right. Ryne Sandberg had that like permanently like bolted to his mantle at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, he was just the best defensive second baseman in baseball. That was an automatic award every year in the National League. It went to Ryne Sandberg. Well, guess what? In 1992, Lind was so good that year with his defense that they had no choice but to break that streak and give it to Jose Lind. Like literally, he's the first guy in a decade to win that award at second base other than Ryne Sandberg, because that's how good Jose Lind was at playing second base. And the Pirates, you know, they wasted a spot in the batting order on a team that won 3 straight division titles, right? That were stacked, that had all these great hitters, and they wasted a spot in the batting order for 3 years in a row just because he was that good on defense. They were willing to sacrifice the number 8 spot in the order because of his defense. And then when he has to make a play on a routine ground ball that he's fielded 1,000 times, and then he makes a play on 999 of those times, in the most important inning of his career, he makes an error.
Yeah, Jose Lind. I liked Jose. I like Chico though. I don't remember him being that. I mean, he wasn't the greatest hitter in the world, but boy, you're like, I don't know. Maybe it's just 235 doesn't sound that bad when you look at the current Pirates lineup. That would
Well, come on, that's a little bit of a low bar.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's hitting better than Newman is right now.
Well, and again, that was the price of business. They were okay with that. They were okay with him, you know, almost never getting on base because it's okay. We'll make up for it in other parts of the lineup. He can't be, what he does on defense can't be replaced at a critical position. And it is a critical position because that's where ground balls typically end up, that or shortstop, you know, and again, just to hit the ball, it wasn't an easy play. It wasn't like Bill Buckner where it rolled through his legs. You know, he did have to kind of reach down and field it, but my goodness, again, 999 times out of 1,000, he makes that play. And really most second basemen, not just really good ones, it should have been a routine play. They should have got Justice out, and then it never comes down to Francisco Cabrera. The game's over when I think it was Brian Hunter pops up, and it hurts. It hurts to this day. Lind's personal life sadly kind of spirals out of control. A few years later, he struggles with cocaine addiction. His wife files a restraining order against him, and he actually spends a year in prison. I couldn't find much about where he is today. There's some sources that say he kind of got his life together and is living quietly in his home country of Puerto Rico. So I hope that's true. I liked Jose Lind too, Steve. I mean, he was a great player, and you don't want to define his legacy by one moment, but boy, just all the brilliant plays he made, all the great defense, and when they needed him the most, he couldn't make the play. And that's sports for you, I guess.
Well, Puerto Rico is not a bad place to hide out. So, got warm weather, right?
Good weather. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So that brings us to our number one moment on the list. And boy, could it be anything else other than this?
7 defensive backs. Blitz on. O'Donnell intercepted, and Larry Brown has a shot at a touchdown. And Brown again, not even near the play. The ball thrown right to him. Larry Brown with 2 interceptions. He just stood there, both of them thrown right at him.
He just stood there, both of them thrown right at him. What else is there to even say? Thanks for listening, everybody. I mean, Neil O'Donnell throwing the interception in the Super Bowl, the second interception in the Super Bowl. It's the moment that it's just the standard bearer for all Pittsburgh sports mistakes. You know, when Tristan Jarry made that turnover a couple months ago, that was all the articles and everything. You know, it Neil O'Donnell-esque. You know, where does this rank behind Neil O'Donnell? I mean, it just that's got to be number one. I think, because it's just the one that everybody remembers. So the background here: Super Bowl 30 in Tempe, Arizona. The Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys. The Steelers are on the verge of taking the lead in the third quarter when Neil O'Donnell throws just a terrible interception to Cowboys defensive back Larry Brown, who's covering grass. And what happened on that first interception, the Cowboys blitzed, and O'Donnell just threw it to a spot on the field where there was no black shirts within miles. I mean, to this day, I still don't. I said this, and we did an episode about the '95 Steelers, and I said it then. I don't understand why Larry Brown was at that spot on the field. There were people who said, "Oh, the game was fixed," and blah blah, and I never bought that. But at the same time, it's really hard to explain why Larry Brown was standing on a spot in the field where there was nobody within miles, and even harder to explain why O'Donnell threw the ball to that spot. So Dallas they end up scoring off that turnover. They take a 20-7 lead, but the Steelers fight back. They get a field goal. They do a surprise onside kick that they recover, and then Bam Morris scores a touchdown to make it 20-17. And now they have the ball back with 4 minutes left, down by 3. They have all the momentum. The Cowboys are going backwards. They literally have no answer for the Steelers at this point. And it's going to be this great moment in history for O'Donnell. He's going to win the Super Bowl. He's going to interrupt the Dallas Cowboys dynasty. And, you know, instead, we all know what happens next. He throws another interception to Brown. And that second interception, I mean, there's a little more debate as to whether Neil threw a bad pass or Andre Hastings, the receiver for the Steelers, ran the wrong route. But I've always maintained that even if Hastings did run the wrong route, O'Donnell didn't need to throw that pass. Again, it was a blitz, and he just unloaded it quickly, which was not his MO. So the Cowboys win the game. Brown wins the absolute cheapest Super Bowl MVP award ever. And then O'Donnell runs away and signs a huge contract with the Jets in the offseason, and then never again has very much success as an NFL player. And kind of like Jose Lean, Steve, this one, it's ironic because, like, again, Jose Lean never made errors. Neil O'Donnell never threw dangerous passes. O'Donnell would take sacks. O'Donnell he wasn't a gunslinger. He was the complete opposite of whatever a gunslinger is. He only threw the ball when it was safe. And here he is in the Super Bowl twice, you know, getting blitzed and just being like, boom, and throwing the ball. And just to do that in the biggest game of his life, just what can you say?
It's Neil. I'm not sure. Like maybe he just panics under pressure. Maybe that's what Neil O'Donnell. You know, he was never like a great quarterback. He was kind of like a Jeff Hostetler or who else? Like I don't know.
Yeah, like
another like
Brad Johnson. Guys that have won the Super Bowl with a good defense and a good running game. And a game manager. He was and he had a good season that year. Like, people forget that. He had because they'd kind of gone away from that philosophy of, you know, running and defense. Their defense kind of had holes in it because Rod Woodson got hurt. And Neil actually had they were playing a lot of 5 wide receiver sets. He had a good year that year. And the Steelers, they had that game. They had it, and he threw it away.
Yeah, This one is really like people really are still upset about this one, and that happened 30 years ago. So I guess that would have been our one for the thumb. So
and to beat Dallas, I mean,
sometimes it doesn't.
they beat Dallas twice in the
that hurt
70s,
too.
and everybody hated that 90s Dallas team. I mean, Michael Irvin and Deion Sanders, and and that was after they had run Jimmy Johnson out of town.
It's Mr. Sanders.
Yeah, Coach. I thought he wanted to be Coach Sanders. Yeah, and or Coach Prime or whatever he wanted to be called. But I mean, just Prime. That's whenever who is that? Who's the guy that was coaching that team for them? Barry Switzer.
Barry Switzer, the guy from Oklahoma.
Yeah, we did it, baby. We did. Oh, I just wanted to punch that guy in the face.
How about them Cowboys?
It just, that one really to this day hurts.
Yeah, Jerry Jones owned the team, so yeah, there's a lot not to like about Big D there.
Well, and they were blowing us out in the first half. Not blowing us out. It was only 10-7 at halftime. They were definitely outplaying us in the first half, but then we kind of calmed down and I don't know. Again, you never know what's going to happen, but the Steelers only needed a field goal there, and I'm the way the game was slanting, I'm quite certain they would have at least gotten to field goal range, and it's just. And if Neal throws one interception, again, you're down, you're trying to come back, and you throw an interception. That's one thing. But he threw it to the same guy twice. And both times, you heard Dick Enberg and Phil Simms say it in the clip. There's nobody even on that side of the field. He just throws it, right? It's not like Larry Brown makes one of those plays where he jumps in front of the receiver, right? Or he breaks on the ball. Yeah. He's just standing there. And I don't know. What else can you say? It's just one of the worst. That's why it's the number one mistake, because Neal threw a championship away. I think if
Neal too would have stayed here and maybe taken the team to another Super Bowl and won a Super Bowl, people would kind of been more forgiving. So, but yeah, I guess agreed. After the year before remember they had that 4th and 3 sign, and then that maybe he just felt he would never let this down, and the Steelers didn't sign big free agents either. So
yeah, and the Jets paid him a ton of money, which was, typical Jets being stupid. And, then they went 1-15 the next year. So, he was going to take the big money. And I
think Rich Kotite was still Rich Kotite.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. If he would have I don't even think he needed to win a Super Bowl. I think if he just would have stayed here for 4 more seasons and gotten the Steelers to the playoffs, but never got back to the Super Bowl, I think it would have been, you're right. I think people would have been a little more forgiving. But it's not what happened. All right. Well, that's our list of the top 20 in-game mistakes. Please connect with the show. There's some links in the show description for our Facebook page, our Twitter feed, and our website, which is pittsburghsportsmemories.weebly.com. And let us know what we missed or what we had out of order. Steve, any parting thoughts?
This is the most perfect list ever. And if you disagree with it, you're just wrong. A little bit of hyperbole to
tell us we're wrong. Tell us.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening to the show. And if you feel inclined, please leave a review and tell your friends. Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Sweet.